Hello and welcome to the AI Pathfinder for Private Equity podcast. I'm on a mission to help private equity firms go from AI curiosity to confident action by building a network that uncovers what's working, where the risks are, and how to make smarter decisions when it comes to AI across the deal lifecycle from origination to value creation. In that mission, I get to meet some brilliant people who are tackling AI from different angles. And today's conversation is going to fit firmly in the legal governance and risk category. While the tech might be impressive, it's often the legal, contractual, or data issues that cause AI projects to stall, or worse, create unexpected risk after deployment. Joining me today is someone who knows how to navigate this. And if I quote his LinkedIn profile, known for giving clear answers in short sentences, we'll put that to the test today. We're going to unpack the legal building blocks as much as we can in the 30 minutes we have for successful AI mobilization and how private equity can help their portfolio companies get this right from day one. Richard, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, and you too. Well, let's start with you, Richard. Could you provide a little bit of background on yourself, the sort of work that you do, and what's driven you to specialize in this area of tech and AI in particular?
Yes, thanks, Steve. I'm a technology lawyer, have been since, well, for the last 25 years, since 2000, working on technology projects. So lots of IT procurement, software development, licensing, that sort of thing for a very long time, mainly for large businesses, retailers, banks, that sort of thing. And for the last, well, certainly since about 2016, I've been quite heavily involved in data and GDPR when that came out. And obviously, before it came out, we got just over 100 clients through their GDPR journey, got them compliant with GDPR, got their governance process in place, and have for the last couple of years been working on AI, which really brings together sort of technology, law, procurement, contracts, issues, and also the governance structure of GDPR. So it really combines those two areas. So that's where I work. A lot of my clients are in-house lawyers at these sorts of businesses. So I do lots of training in particular for the in-house lawyer or the DPO or whoever manages risks in the organization, mainly with a view to sort of managing risk.
And why this area, Richard? What makes you sort of gravitate to tech and AI?
Well, besides it being sort of the things, combining things that I've looked at previously, so combining IT and data, I find it a fascinating area to look at, partly because as a lawyer, it's not that often that things come up that are genuinely new. This is one of those where actually the problem solving involved, it brings together data, it brings together IT, it brings together IP issues. And so for some of the clients that we're working with, we're looking at things like what does consent mean if you're looking at data, and how can you use consent if you're assigning IP rights because you're putting IP into a database that's then going to be used for machine learning, and how on earth would anyone exercise their rights to see that information or to change that information once it's into that system. So all of those sorts of issues are interesting issues, and it's an area where everyone is finding their way, but we're now at a stage, I think, where there have been some ground rules set, and it's very much an international area as well, and had the privilege of being at a large conference just a week ago where some of the largest businesses were talking quite openly about how they're dealing with some of these issues and the sorts of governance issues that they're seeing and what they're putting in place.
Okay, well, look, I think that we know each other. We've known each other because we're curious
Yes.
about this emerging tech, and I suppose we've adapted to some change. Maybe we look for change and we sort of
Mm.
head um, head straight forward into it. But
Yes.
um, others are a little bit more fearful. I
Mm.
wonder, not necessarily going right back to when ChatGPT came out, but to the public. But
Mm.
be interesting to know how legal conversations have changed over the say 12 to 18 months. What's keeping the boards and CEOs up at night? Yeah, so be interesting to see. We've gone this big learning curve, haven't we, to now where there is
Mhm.
there we're going from the education and proof of concepts to production. So it'd be interesting just to get a bit of a feel for what you're hearing.
Yes, certainly. Looking at there's a side of the board, if you like, that I see, which is often the chief legal officer or the head of legal or general counsel. And it's interesting, the sorts of questions I get from them are, first of all, how do I there's two big questions. First of all, how do I do my job? How do I make sure that I'm managing risk with this new technology? Where do I even start in terms of getting the right governance in place? What does that mean? But also, and this happens sometimes in the sessions that I give to those lawyers, they'll sometimes come up to me afterwards, and there's a second question they'll ask, which is, okay, but how does this affect me? How does this affect my own role? And what should I personally be doing? And what are you seeing from other in-house lawyers? And what are they doing? And that sort of there's a bit of business as usual protecting the company, but there's also actually, what does this mean for me going forwards? And what should I be learning in order to best adapt to AI? I think lawyers are a conservative lot by nature. There are still some lawyers and still some law firms who are saying we are banning it entirely. We're not going to even consider the idea of AI. There are still some who are saying we don't want to be first. Well, I think that train's left. I think that would have been the case back in 2023. There are some others who are pushing forwards and actually innovating, finding new ways of working. And I think the conversation is slightly changing now, partly because people are realizing this isn't a hype thing, this isn't going away. This is something that everyone is going to have to sort of adapt to. And I think we're all going through I forget if it's the grieving cycle or Alcoholics Anonymous. I forget. It's either, the sort of going through denial, then embarrassment, then negotiating with it about, which bits of legal practice we're prepared to concede to AI, and finally acceptance and working out, okay, this is a tool. It's going to be a tool that in some ways competes with parts of a role of a lawyer, and how do we best adapt it and use it to get the best results from it. And we're seeing people at different stages of that process. And I think that's true of actually everyone in the business. And some of the best, I've worked on various AI projects now, some of which have worked out well, some of which less so. The better ones have been the ones where everyone gets involved. So the people actually doing the job actually get involved right from the start. The less successful ones are those where someone in senior management has an idea to adopt AI, imposes it on the rest of the business, and inevitably, because there will be problems with it, those people who feel put out by the imposition of AI or feel threatened by it, they're the ones who will find those problems, will raise those issues, and that's often when the project doesn't work. So I think there's some, besides the legal and practical and commercial sides of AI, there's actually some sort of people management as well, in terms of actually introducing AI in a way that takes into account what people might be feeling about the process and how they might feel about accepting it, and how you actually um, upskill those people and empower them to use AI to do their jobs better, rather than them seeing it as a threat to what they've been doing.
Yeah, I've yesterday I was at an event for data and information providers, and obviously they have awesome IP
Yeah.
because they've spent a lot of money in curating this sort of data set that their customers need, but both from an internal perspective of how their teams are using that data, and maybe feeding it into an AI that's not quite authorized.
Mm,
But on the flip side, you've got a customer that wants to do additional work on the data, and it's left the building. You don't know quite what's happened with it. So there's obviously alarm bells ringing, them trying to ring fence this data, but at the same time trying to adapt with the new technology. It can be very, very difficult. It sort of brings us on to, so my next question really is what you're seeing as the biggest blockers, if you like, for companies trying to
mm,
implement AI, and that can be, internal processes, productivity, efficiencies, or it can be maybe more around something that's customer facing.
Yes, I think there's a few things. One of which I mentioned already, which is that actually how you get people to accept it, buy into it, and feel empowered by it rather than threatened by it. And there needs to be a process. Part of that is actually just sensible process management, getting the right plans in place, and getting communication right at the start. Um, there are some challenges. There are one of the surprising things I found about AI, because I've now been negotiating with lots of sort of AI providers, and one of the things I found is, having worked in IT for a long time and worked in software and SaaS and that sort of thing, it is quite difficult to negotiate with some of the very large suppliers the terms of a SaaS license, for instance. Very difficult to change how that software is going to be provided to the business.
Mm.
Um, and usually that's because the same software provider will be providing to lots of different companies. They will have set their terms, and unsurprisingly, they're not going to change them. Well, AI contracts are not like that. The space is not as well developed. Some of the contracts are not good enough. So there are some real issues in terms of ownership of IP, ownership of IP outputs, and the inputs and the prompts and those sorts of things, and the ongoing monitoring. And actually, what I found is some of those contracts can be negotiated. They are much more fluid. So there is more of a process in terms of onboarding providers of AI. I think companies that go through the process really need to work out the problem they're solving and making sure that the AI fits, and that can make it a longer process. So that can be a more of a challenge. There's the transparency element of working out exactly what the thing does, and someone within the business. So again, unlike traditional software where someone would just buy the software, carry out acceptance tests, and then that's almost the job done. The software does the work, and it's accepted, signed off, and it's off someone's list. AI solutions, because they continuously evolve, they're continuously learning, and the outputs change over time. What that means is you actually need someone to take responsibility for it. You
Mhm.
need someone to take responsibility that's close enough to the tech, close enough to the service line to understand what the AI is producing, but also someone who is responsible overall, who can make the decisions when there has been a breach, when they need to switch the thing off, when they need to actually take some other sort of evasive action because the AI isn't producing the results it previously was. I think I saw there was an MIT study that looked into the risks of AI, and it
Mm.
came out with something like 350 of them. So it's one of those things not to read if you've just if you've just implemented an AI solution in business. But just over half of those were actually risks that would crop up not at the implementation stage, but sometime afterwards. So there
Mm.
are various things that you need to keep on top of, and that I think makes a difference. And it's something that, again, it needs to be part of that process. So you need to have decided at the beginning, when we take this on, who's going to continuously take responsibility for it.
So you have you mentioned GDPR earlier.
Mm,
So you had someone responsible, I suppose,
mm.
linked to that. Is it something similar that you're describing here?
It is. No, it is. It is. The regulation of AI is very similar in many ways to the regulation of GDPR. So you need a person who's responsible, and ideally it's not actually one person, but it's a committee. I speak to in-house lawyers all the time, and I'm saying to them, you do want a committee, you want someone in sales and in marketing and in finance involved in the process, partly because if you don't do that, it's likely to be you, the in-house lawyer, who has to make the decisions and who has to deal with breaches and deal with problems and deal with issues when they come up. But also, actively want stakeholders involved in the sort of implementation of AI, in the same way that for GDPR, you need parts of the business involved. They need to know what they need to do. So it is a bit like um, everyone in the business knowing how they deal with customer data. That's the only way that you get the business to actually be compliant. You need the same with AI. You need everyone in the business to understand what AI can do, the limits of it, what they should and shouldn't be doing with it, because otherwise, similar to GDPR, having a policy won't be enough. So having the regulator, and actually it's the same in the UK at least, it's a lot of the work that's been done in terms of regulating AI it's the same regulator, it's the ICO, so the same regulator as for data. The regulator is not interested in a set of words on a page. So similar to GDPR, where one of the frustrations would be often you have clients who have just taken a policy from somewhere else, put it on their website, and they think that's the job done because they've got the right words in place. It's the same with AI. The words don't matter. You can get an AI policy quite widely and from a range of different places. If you're not doing the right things, then actually what's said in the policy won't help. So again, it's about changing practice. And the other way it's similar to GDPR actually. GDPR changed the rules on data because what it did was it made businesses have a positive obligation, a bit like health and safety. They couldn't just not do the wrong things. They actually had to start doing the right things and showing their decision making. So if you're relying on legitimate interest, for instance, you need to do a legitimate interest assessment. That needs to be set out. That doesn't go anywhere. It's something that you store, but you store the decision so that if a regulator comes knocking, asks why this happened, you can show them the note that was made at the time of why you made that decision. Well, it's very similar with AI in that you need to have those decisions recorded at the same time. They don't necessarily go anywhere. There's not a place for them to be sent. But if there's an audit as to how the company got into this mess, why the AI has been making decisions that are biased, which are discriminatory, which are offensive, whatever the case may be. You need to say, okay, well, what was the decision making at the time? How did you come to the decision that this was a good idea? And if you can't show that, you can't show that there was a positive decision made, then you are likely to be in more trouble with the regulator because you need to, the decision making is part of the governance process.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you've given some good
Mm,
guidance there in terms of, well, look, we are seeing committees,
mm,
but often it's committees to look at the technology, not
mhm,
look at the necessarily the governance perspective. But I think that's a really important point
mm,
for my audience is to understand where that sort of responsibility lies, and that it's really important to have this sort of audit trail in
mm,
place. Sort of adding to that,
mm,
what other sort of legal foundations should I mean, it could
mm,
be any company, but
mm.
let's say PE-backed company should
Yeah.
be thinking about. They could be at the start or very early in their process, that it's
Mm.
still time for them to put these foundations in place. What do you think those two or three things are?
I can give you six if you like.
Got six, absolutely.
This is quite it's very similar to the sort of in-house lawyer question really about what do I need to do. I mean, one of the things is to first just in case people are in this mindset, because this has been promoted on the media as a battle between innovation and governance, as if those two things are opposed. Partly it's getting out of that mindset, because actually you can innovate better and you'll get more value from that innovation if that is properly governed.
Mhm,
It doesn't mean going slower. It
mhm,
doesn't mean holding things back. Often you can move just as fast. Often it's just a question of, taking the notes as you do it, showing what you're doing and why you're doing it at the same time.
mhm,
Um, but there's really a six-stage process, which I've been running through with clients for some time now, and having been at the conference and hearing from the likes of sort of MasterCard and AstraZeneca, I was relieved to hear that they have similar processes and similar frameworks in place that aren't that different. There's an AI mnemonic that goes with it, which is penguins can glide through rocky caves. And
Okay.
there you go, six things to do, and they're actually paired together. So the first is the P and the C, that's the planning and communications. So the first thing is to actually work out what you're going to use the AI for, make sure that there's a problem to be solved, making sure that you're not just buying an AI because it's a bright, shiny object, which
Mhm,
actually does happen more often than you would think, and getting your communications right. So it's both internal and external. internally so that you get the employees on board and making sure that people buy into the AI and make the best use of it, but also externally so that customers know what you're doing and appreciate the value that you're going to get from the AI. So that's the first thing. So planning and communication. There's governance and training. So the governance is having the governance structure, the sort of thing that we talked about having the right people involved, having a process that will be triggered when things go wrong, a bit like a sort of data breach. So making sure there's the right people there, making sure that you're keeping on track of the results from the AI, and training to make sure that that is throughout the organization so that people know that there needs to be a level of AI literacy. Now that's a requirement in the EU under the EU AI Act, but actually it should happen here as well. It should happen anywhere where AI is involved, and so that people know what they can and can't do, and the limits of AI, and if they do innovate, how they best do that, because there are ways you can encourage people to actually use the AI to create value, and you want to be doing that. You want to create an environment that encourages that. And finally, risk and controls. So there's almost a brainstorming exercise required in a business to work out, well, what could possibly go wrong with the AI. And you won't capture everything, but that should be tailored to the business. So there are different types of business dealing with different levels of personal data, dealing with some places where AI may not be the most appropriate solution. In some cases, human empathy is required by customers, and working out those risks and keeping a log of those risks and controls that you've put in place to manage them. And that might be having a human in the loop, so a human actually overseeing the final decision-making process. It might be having a human who's responsible. If you've got planning and communications set up and governance and training set up within the organization, and you've been through that risk and controls process, you've worked out what the risks are and how you might mitigate them, that puts you in a much better position when it comes to either a regulator if they come knocking, and typically that would happen where something has gone badly wrong. It's all about, and it also gives both the employees and customers a level of trust. And actually, that's the big thing with AI in particular, is that there is it's only as good as people have continued to trust it. And if you lose trust of customers because of an incident, or because the AI starts to produce results that it wasn't previously, or even if there's a perception that that's happened, that's where you get the real risk. It's a sort of reputational risk to the business. And if the business is built on AI, if it becomes an AI first company, then this is really quite significant for the business. It can make the difference between customers choosing you and choosing someone else. So having that framework in place, I would suggest is the basics behind good governance and making sure that you're on top of the issues.
And it's not just a case of putting a one-liner that says the results might not be accurate.
Yes, this may not constitute legal advice. I don't think it is. No, that's right. So it's having that's one thing, but then there are so many. There's you might have seen I think it's the website, is it incident.ai, of all the sort of AI related incidents that you've seen, and some of those are not things. Some of those are places where the AI has done its job. It's done exactly what it was meant to do, but the outcome wasn't expected. There's the Amazon, the simplest form of this, the Amazon, you bought this, you might like this algorithm, which gave some particularly unpleasant results when a book that had suicide as its subject was promoted. It promoted other items and things from Amazon that you would not want to be
Right.
promoting in that situation. There was and again, the AI was doing exactly what it was meant to. It was finding things that were related to the product that it was related to, and you wouldn't necessarily have thought of that in advance, which is why you need that sort of ongoing governance, because some of the things that will go wrong with AI you don't know yet, because you can't possibly think of everything in advance. So that's where sort of having that ongoing process is needed, I think.
Yeah, and I think that as businesses become sort of more aware of where the advantages are, is perhaps looking at narrower use cases, so they're able to perhaps make or have better controls over the inputs and outputs
Mm.
because it's in such a sort of narrow space, or using AI small language models where there's potentially less risk of
Yeah.
hallucinations, but as you say, it's a constant sort of review process. And it's something I want to sort of from my audience,
Mm.
the private equity audience are looking at themselves and how they manage a lot of
Mm.
sensitive documentation, but they're also seeing that there are advantages of using AI to for a number of benefits, not just in terms of efficiencies, but they're also custodians over their portfolio
Mm.
and which there can be several. Do you think that there's an opportunity, or do you think it should be the PE firm themselves that sort of set those standards? Or do you see other ways that there could be some advantage for a PE firm to perhaps utilize the knowledge around that, that portfolio and within the firm? There's potentially too many questions I'm going to ask here. And you were talking about, this ownership. Should that
Mm.
be perhaps there should be a capability within the PE firm that can then sort of support the group, or should that be delegated across the portfolio, which could be cross-sector,
Mm.
cross-region?
I think you probably want some of both. If you're looking to build value in the individual companies in a portfolio, then you want those individual companies to have their own governance process, I would suggest, because you want ultimately, when it comes to a sale, you're going to want to make sure that that company is standalone, that it can support itself and it has its own process. But I think a layer on top of that is that every PE business ought to have their own governance and to work out what they are prepared to accept and to not accept within their own business as well.
Do you think that that can become part of their sort of investment thesis, their differentiation
Mm.
in the way that they conduct themselves in, or how they, um, well, it's that equation you talked about, wasn't it? Sort of innovation v governance.
I think so. I think at the moment it's a bit like the Apple taking the privacy as its sort of differentiator. I think it is worth doing. There's some marketing value in getting governance right and in showing that you're getting governance right. And is in many ways it shouldn't be a differentiator. This is what everyone should be doing. But I think if you can do that and you can show the value behind it and you can show the value creation, I suspect we're not far off a number of different incidents that will affect companies that have brought in AI and are not regulating it. At that point, I think people will legitimately and genuinely be asking questions. What was behind this? What have you got in place? I think we'll see it much more in due diligence exercises for company sales. I think it will come up in I think it's the sort of thing that we'll see reported in earnings reports and those sorts of things. I think we'll see what is happening with AI and what level of innovation a business has been through in those sorts of places, which I think will inevitably make it much more of a public issue.
Yeah. Sort of ethos really of what I'm doing with the network is to try and bring examples, make it accessible,
Mm.
in all the different sort of areas that they need to try and get their head around. And I just wonder, so we're coming near to the end there, and obviously I don't want you to share sensitive information, but is there something that you've been involved with recently that's taught you sort of something new around this topic and that would be useful for the group?
There have been, I mean, besides the project, the getting everyone involved, that does come from a live project where it was the most highly paid person in the room who decided that was something they were going to push ahead with. I think the sorts of issues, I think one of the things that comes to mind is actually getting people together to work on this where you've got people learning from the ground up. I think one of some of the best examples of projects I've seen has been where individuals have been given the ability to use AI and experiment with it, and actually to learn a bit about how it works and why it works. And I think it's actually incumbent on most of us to learn how it works and how you can best use it, because that gives you a sort of degree of um, a degree of agency compared to buying products that promise the earth, some of which actually can be recreated within a business by enthusiastic individuals who have been encouraged to innovate. People find the best solution. If you've got a lot of talented people who are good at their job, getting those people to use AI is almost inevitably going to be better than buying an AI solution that does what they do,
Mm.
because they will know what's good. They'll know whether the result is any good. They'll know the sort of subtleties to look out for and the things that can go wrong and the sorts of issues that customers need or want, or the questions that customers don't always ask but they actually need. And so if you've got talented people, I would suggest getting those people acquainted with and up to speed with AI in such a way that they can feel that this is adding to their role. That makes any implementation so much easier, and it also has the benefit of actually getting better results from what I've seen as well, because the people who are the people who are encouraged and actually actively interested in using AI in their role, they're the ones that make a positive difference. They're the ones who actually find the benefits. They'll help the implementation. They'll get over the obstacles, and there almost inevitably will be. They will make a much smoother transition. I'd suggest getting some champions in each area where you want to implement AI. Getting people who are genuinely keen. That's where I've seen the best sort of smoothest implementation, if you like.
Oh, great advice. And it comes back to people, doesn't it?
Mm,
Again, so as change management and those people that are super close to that a use case are
mm,
absolutely the right people. I suppose it's a blend of personalities, really, about how that you've got someone that's curious, you've got someone that's maybe quite analytical,
yes.
and that they can experiment because we have for very little money tools that are very powerful. And so obviously we want to be using them safely in a governed way, but it presents so much opportunity, as you said, versus going out there and thinking that just buying a tool is going to
Mm,
be the answer. It's probably not the immediate answer, that's for sure. I think that's a great place for us to leave the pod, which has been fascinating and gone very, very quickly, too quickly. But you're joining us, aren't you, for our breakfast briefings that we hold quarterly. So you'll be there to answer questions, I'm sure, of those in the network. But it leaves me to say thanks so much for your clarity, brevity, penguins, lots of things for the listeners to go away and think about what the practical steps are. And look, there's in the show notes, there'll be Richard's details of his LinkedIn profile. So I would suggest you connect, and also details on the briefings that I mentioned. But for now, thank you very much to Richard, and thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thank you.